and solutions are harder to come by. There are maybe only like a couple of hundred people who have ever suggested solutions, and maybe I can be one of those people. So by harnessing you guys' creative output, I can I can get some solutions in the air, right? Um,
Oh God, I'm solving.
I'm solving.
Are you trying to commoditize
Solving.
our solution?
I'm
Oh
commodifying your
my.
solution. That's right.
Solution one: commodify, counter commodify the commodify.
Yeah,
You
I'm
will no no
commodifying
The
commodification.
trans commodifying of all commodities.
you do not commodify the goods and services. You just take them.
Now,
That's how you defeat consumerism.
un, un,
Man's been muted up until this point. Now he wants to speak.
unironically, I really do want. I think we've got enough brain power in this Discord chat that maybe we can actually say something somewhat useful to somebody else. How does that sound, guys?
I have a
No, yeah, you're right.
solution.
Okay, what we're gonna do in terms of solutions is we're gonna go in order again, and we're gonna go slightly out of order because Kongzi has said he wants to speak and then he has to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Kongzi go first.
All right. Well, what's been underpinning our diagnosis is nihilism, is it not? We keep on identifying this emptiness, this lack of meaning, this nihilism, right? And how do we counter, this it's a greater battle of finding meaning in a world where meaning doesn't seem so sure. And I think instead of I think trad bitching is a huge problem, and I think how we could counter that is finding greater meaning to aspire to, or greater transcendental value that really brings beauty to one's life. To bring I would like to use the example of Saint Augustine's Confessions, where he talks about the infiniteness of and beauty of God in one passage, and it's really quite amazing how he talks about the feeling that he got from truly understanding the vastness and wonder of Christ and of God and of the Christian religion, and I think that is what the solution will be,
Do you know
more so than
what book or chapter
yes.
from the Confessions that is?
I will try and find it. I can't say it offhand,
Okay.
but in my edition of the Confessions, it breaks down what is discussed in each chapter. So maybe later on I'll post it. But more so than critiquing, we need to find those greater things that that build, that construct, not deconstruct, and that is really what I think is key to combating this problem.
Well, right, and consumerism as a force is deconstructive, and you can't deconstruct the deconstruction.
Exactly.
Right. Um, so you talk about finding meaning, so to speak, and finding meaning in that sort of experience of the transcendental God. So would you say then that really the antidote to consumerism, at least as far as it ails us in modern society, is a recovering of sort of a religious ethic, or just religious faith in general? And would you say this is something that like the battle against consumerism, quote unquote, is something that's waged sort of in the heart of every man individually, or is this something that's a sort of communal effort?
I don't like that distinction between individual and community, because individuals play such a huge role in communities, and communities play such a huge role for the individual, and they're so tied to one another. So I think the answer is both. It's in the hearts of every individual and the spirits of every community. And I want to leave my answer a little bit vague, because I don't know anything for sure. But I do think a religious ethic and a spiritual revival is in the right direction.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Clive. And since Clive, of course, is from a different religious tradition than a lot of us here, maybe he'll have a different take, or maybe not. I don't know. But Clive, would you like to go ahead and jump on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, I might have the same take as everybody else. I've decided just to give up and watch Pepsi commercials and play video games.
Base.
I, I'm just kidding, you guys. So I mean, I don't feel like I have a comprehensive solution to this problem at all. But you know, to go back to the kind of the pyramid model that I brought up before, with nihilism at the bottom, and then addiction and gluttony in the middle, and the effective power structures, exploitation by power structures on top. It seems to me that it's probably going to be more effective to try to address either the bottom of that, which is nihilism, or the top part of that, which is power, rather than just going to a person and telling them, hey, your consumerism is gluttonous. I think you might be addicted to consumption goods, because the fact of the matter is, if you're talking to someone who's nihilistic already, then just telling them that they're addicted might not accomplish anything. So as far as addressing nihilism, that's a big topic. I mean, that's A, religion, also B, the entire concept of the meaning crisis. People noticing the nihilism in their lives and other people's lives is why 12 rules for life became a big thing. And then on the other end, addressing power structures, well, that's the purpose of politics. So on the one hand, you've got religion, and on the other hand, you've got politics. Let's
So
try to solve that.
really, there's a two-pronged approach, right? There's the sort of the religious approach
Exactly.
that it attacks the nihilistic underpinnings of the system, and then there's the political approach that sort of removes the power structures that are causing the proliferation of this of the soma, so to speak,
Right.
which is what we've called consumerism.
Right.
Excellent, Clive. Thank you. Convert.
Right. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, since I'm very ignorant on some of these more tactical points, such as the political and the tackling the power structure, I'll leave that to the next person in line, who I'm sure will have a lot to say about that. And I'll speak more to the religion aspect that Clive mentioned. I will say that, I mean, I think to the point of nihilism, if nihilism is kind of the underpinning philosophical or worldview problem that we see that gives rise to this kind of consumerist, pyramid issue, and then the answer to nihilism is to find meaning, objective meaning, and that's most often found in religion. I will say, however, that particularly a feature of the religion, or the nature of the religion, that would be actually effective is that it has to be one which asks something meaningful of the participant, of the various demographics that are involved in reaction or neo-reaction. I will hail from the traditional Catholic perspective. I think part of the reason why perhaps many younger millennials or Gen Zers are attracted to traditional Catholicism of the other perhaps various religious options is that it's, while some of it's just a LARP, it's that it really does ask something of the person. It involves sacrifice, which is antithetical, even just really in like the word, to consumerism. If consumerism is in words and the glorification and the exaltation of the self by the self, sacrifice is the humiliation of the self towards another. And this gives, I think, what is another very important part is that nihilism is almost implicit in nihilism, or at least immediately adjacent to it, is an issue of loneliness. Because if there is no meaning and you feel like nothing matters for any of us, you still feel alone.
Like my
And
friends
so,
at my school.
yeah, no, really. And so I think two features of the religious approach are: one, the religion asks something of the person, but two, that there must be the communal aspect, and it can't just be like a get good and make a chart or rectify yourself. You have to reach out to. I mean, this reveals something about how much I'm kind of a part of it. I speak in memes, but like reach out to your fellow kings. Like
Don't just
honestly,
clean your room.
yeah, like you have to give something to somebody else. You kind of have to be willing to deign to lend the hand to be like, okay, look, I see that you obviously are lost along your way, and you want to be able to clean your room. You want to be able to stop cooming, but you need help doing it. You need encouragement. You need systems. And so from the religion, from like the meaning aspect, it has to one be something that demands a sacrifice, but two, it has to be communal, which involves people making sacrifices one to the other. And I will say that this solves a problem because this solves a problem in multiple facets, because if consumerism is treating like things as a means unto themselves and treating also like people like objects, especially in the commodification of sex, relations to persons, and religions, which in the Christian religion is like everything is ordered to persons, the Trinity. These are the kind of the only things, persons, that can be ends in themselves, not as things to be used, but as things to know. It's really a qualitative difference. And so this demanding sacrifice towards an end, which in the Christian religion is a persons, the Trinity, but also community, which is not consumption of a person, but the knowing of a person, one to the other. These are necessary.
I actually love everything you just said, and more to the point, I wanted to build off everything you just said because one of the things, Despot, could you put on your push to talk? I'm getting
Mhm.
echoing. Thank you. Um, One of the things that you said, of course, is about the importance of sacrifice and how consumerism is sort of inwardly directed. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, is that one of the most radically anti-consumerist things you can do is have children, because consumerism and I always make this about sex because um, you know, something was wrong with me. I was dropped on my head as a child or whatever. But I think this is a really good sort of connection to make, is that consumerism is masturbatory. It is it is all focused on the self and what is pleasing to the self, whereas procreation is fundamentally a sacrifice for the good of another, and especially for the good of another who does not even exist yet. Um, and so it combines all of these aspects. It combines the aspect of giving to a community because you're enlarging the community by the procreative act. It's it's not uh, it's not obviously as it's not especially aesthetic, uh, ascetic, I mean to say, in the sense of you're not denying yourself, all pleasures. We're sort of hitting an Aristotelian mean here. Um, but, this sort of principle of generation, or this principle of construction, is outwardly directed in the procreative act. Um, so, uh, there's my point based on my fixation of sex, and I hope there are no Freudian psychoanalysts in the comments to tell me how weird I am.
You want to have sex with your mother.
I suppose. But yeah, that's sort of the thing I had in the background, um, the whole time you were talking. And so one of the things is, right, yeah, like joining a sort of religious tradition that expects sacrifice of individuals is one way to go about it. Well, sorry, it is essential, I would say. But then going the step further, the one really radical thing, materially and spiritually, in the world that that would overturn the hegemony of consumerism and even the hegemony of nihilism, so to speak, is having children. It's the one thing that a lot of people aren't having. Um, and I don't think that's an accident that these things, lowered birth rate and increased, nihilism, despair, and the attendant consumerism. I don't see that these two things are, they have a correlational relationship, but there's also probably a causational relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, having children would be, I mean, like in the you can describe kind of like the poetic sense in which it is antithetical to the consumerist idea, but also just like in a practical sense is like once you have a kid, you can't live the consumer
Hmm.
lifestyle. It's antithetical.
Well, and it's also not only does it practically bar you from the hyper consumerist lifestyle, but also it's part of the political solution, right? Because the only thing that religious conservatives really have going for them demographically, right, is their relatively higher birth rates.
Yeah.
So it's also a pillar of the political response. I'm gonna go ahead and let Clive jump in because he acted like he was gonna talk, and then we're gonna kick it back over to Despot.
No, man, I was just agreeing with everything you just said.
Okay, awesome. So Despot.
Well, I'm too tired for me to explain too much, because you already all know how much I say in regards to this topic on solutions.
Yeah,
I mean, I
This
something
guess
is your
about
chance. This
something
is your
about getting
chance.
dinner, a
I'm just gonna
generally,
I'm just
a
gonna
good
post
summary.
the Despoiler manifesto in the comments. You guys should just read that.
No, just here's a simple idea. One thing that everyone should think of, even if there is no exact strategy on how to do this. Even if you do reproduce and have more children and so forth, the world around you is still extremely hostile. The institutions of power are still there pursuing consumerism, wanting people to be more consumerist to fill their bottom lines. So then, while being in a Christian culture, reproducing more, making more children, and all those things are great, they're all strategies based off of something more defensive, growing your numbers and or making yourself better. But what is usually lacking amongst these circles is an offensive strategy that's a somewhat believable means of trying to attack consumerism, or heck, any neoliberal power structure that we live in today. So we already know one example that I've always brought up to people, the ever so famous and beloved despoiler scheme, and many other schemes of mine. But generally, whenever people think of plans on how to do things, they also forget that human beings, still being human beings, many things clog up their mind and their time. Perhaps people already actually have families and they're too busy working their jobs to feed their families. Perhaps some are more distracted by their leisure, being consumerists themselves, though maybe not as extreme as what we would hate, and or perhaps they're busy working, many or going to school. Many things fill people's time, which mean any action would normally be something that is self-incentivizing, so that people would want to do them. And so we have ideas like with the despoiler scheme, it's one of many ideas for a self-incentivized means of attacking consumerism, or at least attempting to, which we all know. I'll explain the structure here for the audience. You yourself, wherever you are, be it in your locality, because we're in the internet and we're all dispersed, you find a large number of people that might be interested in getting an easy, simple, temporary job or easy, simple money, and simply tell them, using what relatively large numbers you can find of such people, to lobby local government to give your organization some form of financial grants or subsidies, and usually as a way to fund your own projects, and dividing some of that funds to the very people that help support you. That way you can have an incentive to get people to act, to extract resources from the power structures that be, for you to do whatever you want, be it make art, be it maybe spread the cause's ideas to more people, so you can expand traditional indoctrination of more members into these ideas and so forth. But generally, the point I'm like to point out is whatever plan you do, it must find a way to self incentivize its members who undertaken it, so that you can ensure that they can reliably and potentially do the things in the first. Don't demand too much sacrifice when people don't want to make them.
I think that's a fair point, Despot. I think when you're coming from a culture where people are not used to sacrifice, and then all of a sudden asking them to go all in, so to speak, um, with in an uphill battle with really nothing going for them, basically in terms of the political struggle, because that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about your sort of ideas, is that it is important to keep in mind that you know people. There's a difference between people being motivated by their need to consume and people just logically wanting compensation for their time and energy.
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, people only become revolutionaries when they have to.
Right, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Um, so moving on, Hank, would you have a few words
All
to say?
right.
All right,
So I got a good set of things to say for this one.
excellent.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna need to start making some art. The art needs to be. This kind of goes into what everyone's already said. So you need to come from already a place where sacrifices, at least somewhat, it's there in your mind, at least a level of Christian ethics or ethics regarding your community. Um, in particular, you're going to also need a community itself. While it can be an online one, it's better to get a physical one as soon as possible. I almost majored in art, but I kind of just ended up leaving it when I realized that no one was, how should I put this? You're effectively alone if you're going to be anywhere close to like a distant right levels of it. I decided just to go into computer science. But
Based.
making art, yeah. What a mood, Skellington. So just start painting, drawing. Just keep doing it every day. Put in, sacrifice that daily time amount to start to get results. Just imagine, just keep putting it. I've been thinking about doing.
Skellington, stop breathing into your microphone.
Okay.
Stop breathing, Skellington.
Stop
Hold it
breathing.
all in.
I am. It's just the wind rattling through.
Your ribs.
All right, Hank, go ahead.
But I've been thinking about once summer hits when I'm out of school, possibly setting up some videos and doing possibly some kind of workshop. I don't know how it would work. Probably through Discord of live streaming what's in front of them or someone posting pictures, but having an actual art workshop for maybe Canis or something.
Hmm.
I've been thinking about doing that. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, and I think that's a good angle, to come at it from, because of course, we have all these pop culture art pieces, so to speak, that have become integral to people's identity, and you need you don't just get rid of the bad art. You replace bad art with good art.
Yeah, you want to make, well, that's the thing, right? Like when you remove something, this is like the whole meme with anarchists, right? Like I like my friendly egoist anarchists that I know, but when you make a vacuum, something comes to fill it. And if you don't have something to fill it, you might as well have given your enemy more ground in some regards.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Can
We're
I ask the question to Hank here though? Do you? I imagine you have something kind of in mind for the style, or the kind, or the intention of
Um,
what this art's supposed to convey. Because we could just we could make artistic representations, but they could be kind of um,
Meaningless, yeah.
well,
Um,
meaningless, and
Or
also
you can make art that contributes to the consumerism.
you could, or you could make art that's like super black pilling.
oh yeah, you can make pure nightmare depression fuel. That's not at all a lie.
I kind of like the nightmare fuel.
Yeah, you would like the nightmare fuel.
I mean, there's ways to do that. I mean, if you want to go into that without it being so horrible, and I kind of have to agree with what our buddy the distributor said about it on one of his streams a while back. If you don't want the cringe of romanticism and a little more dark edginess, go with some gothic style, right? Um, that's just a way to go
Don't
about it.
worry, guys.
I,
Everything I make is miserable.
I ask this unironically. I guess I'm not savvy on sometimes what is really meant by Gothic, because I imagine it's like a literary and an artistic and like a period term maybe. But
Hmm.
Have
Yeah.
you heard of a
what
band called The Cure?
I've heard of The Cure, but I don't.
Gothic.
I listen to like death metal and stuff like that.
Here, English major. Gonna have to swagger in and show you guys how it's done. So, no, just kidding. Um, when people talk about Gothic, especially like Gothic literature, Gothic horror, what they're really talking about is it's a subgenre of romantic literature. So you're talking about people like Poe or like Mary Shelley, and generally Gothic horror deals with the same kind of like supernatural, transcendental, highly emotional sort of subject matter and themes that romantic literature deals with. But oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, Gothic literature sort of subverts audience expectations around the supernatural. So usually the supernatural is revealed to be natural. So a good example of this is Charles
Scooby
Brockton.
Doo.
Uh, yeah, Scooby Doo. Or Charles Brockton Brown wrote this book called Velant, which is about a man who believes that God is speaking to him, but it's actually supposed to be a ventriloquist who is projecting his voice. Now, of course, that's a not necessarily a perfect example because at the end of that book, it's sort of left ambiguous what the actual events were. But needless to say, usually Gothic horror traffics in that sort of exploration of the supernatural, usually reducing it to naturalistic um, explanations. And another thing that it really traffics in, and this is mainly Poe, really, is it's it's typified by an exploration of madness. Specifically, like coming into and this is where H.P. Lovecraft gets a lot of his stuff. Is
Oh,
that
perfect. This will be easy.
right? Well, because H.P. Lovecraft was a huge Edgar Allan Poe fanboy. And the thing about Poe's characters, right, is that they're faced with something um, like for example, the Telltale Heart or something like that. Um, they're faced with some kind of phenomenon that they can't cope with, and their psyche just kind of breaks, right? And they have this moment of this outburst or something like that, or something like the Raven, for example. So I think if I can, and try to connect this back into our discussion, right, is that in a new or a neo-Gothic literature, so to speak, the kind of monsters that we could be confronting would be perhaps the monster of nihilism itself. Um,
Okay, so this is this okay. So the reason I wanted to make sure I wasn't misusing my understanding of Gothic, but I say this unironically, like vaporwave and glitchwave art kind of does this juxtaposition of like it's kind of the romanticism of like what we wish some of this consumerism stuff actually um, promised us would fulfill, juxtaposed with kind of the nihilistic materialism. But you can find people like using this to then kind of preach the message of like look beyond this, techno dystopia that we're in. Um, and I say that also because I know that among kind of dissident right, uh, a couple of people, it seems like the vaporwave aesthetic is largely appreciated.
mhm.
If it makes you feel any better, I don't mainly do little to none almost digital art. I mainly paint and draw. Well, look, listen, if you don't have actual works of art, like physical, you're gonna get in trouble real fast. Um, the underlying like fundamentals to learning how to do art, you need to know those rules before you break them. That's kind of just how art works. So if I can get people to know how to draw simple balls, to drawing actual human forms, they'll eventually start being able to understand how to express their creativity. I can't teach someone to be creative, but I can teach them how to express their creativity.
Correct.
I'm a digital 3D artist, and I do know how to competently draw, especially contours and even paint. Though what people misunderstand is that you must know those things, but you don't necessarily have to be professional with
Oh,
those
you don't have
things.
to be master. Yeah, you don't have to
Yeah.
master them. I mean, we've already had this talk in private and compared works too. But
Um,
that's the
Excellent. I love this discussion of art, but it is getting a little bit
long and
digression-y.
off topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm gonna Skellington.
Sorry.
All right. I'm gonna I'm gonna reach through the microphone and beat you. Um. So,
Actually have a question.
go ahead, Emmett.
So do you think that progressives actually know the rules of art, or
No,
they
I don't.
like, for
They
example,
well to
But that's
learn
the
it they
strength.
do. No, well they do learn the basics. Like that's how they get their basic A, right? They drew the basic levels for art. The thing is that if you're like I'll put it this way also, if you want to deconstruct something, you have to know what you're deconstructing. That's the other thing in line with their motives, right?
Hmm.
Um, most of the people I'm painting nudes with or drawing with are effectively progressives. I can't really deny this, right?
but like the person who, like, I don't know who made the piss Christ. It's absolutely disgusting.
They probably got into the community at some point. They probably could make better art, but they're getting funded to pay, or they're getting paid to make that kind of crap low tier art. So it doesn't surprise me.
I am gonna go ahead and redirect here, because I wanted to get living beings' take on the whole matter.
So
This is
to
we're still
refresh
talking about
everyone's
solutions. I know that we've
solutions to the problem of consumerism is
correct.
the question.
That is the question.
And there has been lots of great food for thought expressed by our assembly here. For my
Our
part,
glorious band
I
of
would.
It's a convivium.
uh, for my part, I would say I'm tempted to quote a normie fitness meme and say, "Stay hungry for those skinny feels." Um, Understand the true aim of the appetite, the true natural aim of the appetite, and stay focused on them. Uh, True fitness, true satiation, be it physical, material, spiritual, social, familial, relational, or any type, is what we need to really train our hunger on, and not, whatever's being dished up by the people who are after our resources. Um, and beyond that, to give as much as you get, to give it to your kids and your community. Enjoy the good life, but pay it forward, and maintain the flow. When your cup is full, don't let it go stagnant and wasteful, but keep it as a flowing system where the all of the good things of life are moving freely and not just hoarded. And I guess that's it. It's about, enjoy the good life, but pay it forward.
Excellent. Skellington, I know you have wonderful insights.
Shame, guilt. You need to shame consumer. It's like you said, you need to build a community, but one of the community is shaming unwanted behavior. So
You're gonna. Yeah.
if somebody's being a consumer, make fun of them. Tell them that that's not okay. It's not.
Moral credit system?
Yeah,
It
moral.
sounds like
moral bullying.
Gatekeeping. Community
So
gatekeeping.
you need to shame them. You need to guilt them. You need to make fun of the fact that they base their identity around Marvel movies. Make fun of that. Like for instance, Red Letter Media does that. That YouTube channel, right? If any of you watch that, they make fun of Star Wars fans all the time. They get that fix like ATSTs. I recognize that. Oh my god. You know what I mean? So you need to make fun. You need to make fun of them to sort of break them out of their consumer miasma.
I mean
And also,
that is true that shame is a very effective social tool.
yes,
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say there is a merit to this, the use of kind of the use of shame or chastisement. However, I think it's like, what's the prudent application of it? Um,
yeah.
since I'm going to view everything through like a theological and religious lens, consider the fact that it's like people who weren't part of the Christian community could be drawn in by, well, yes, exhortation to repentance, but like the offering of mercy. But there was a difference between probably the exhortation that they would give to there was a difference between the exhortation they would give to the non-initiatives versus then like when Paul gives the directions of like cast these people out to Satan for the mortification of their flesh. I think like those two acts are different. And when you say shaming, I view that more as like somebody who's kind of already in the in group and you're helping to strip them of the rest of their infirmities. But I don't know if that's how practically like prudent that is for somebody who's like, say, like your VR friend. Like, did you ever tell this guy like, look, man, you're a
You need
loser.
to.
You base your identity around the HTC Vive. Cut it out.
I think I did make fun of him for wanting for seeing Endgame or something, or Infinity War. I don't remember. But you need to you need to befriend them first, right? But then once they're in your group, you need to sort of chastise them. If they're doing this kind of behavior, you don't have to like be brutal or bully them really bad about them. But it is a part. We need to bring shame back, like especially around sexual behavior and that sort of thing. It's part of it. I understand your points. It's not going to get you the whole way there, but it's a good strategy. And I would also say that another good strategy for getting rid of it is to try and, yeah, like Living Being said in the chat, you need to offer mercy with shame. You need to offer a way out. Like there needs to be a condition as to which you stop making fun of them for being. And you need to offer. It's like, hey, are you watching that Kate movie again? Ooh, why don't you come build a barn with us instead? That's that. Do something like that. So, another thing I would say is the economy, because right now we live in they literally call it the service economy. It's an economy based around services. Services. That's basically that's like a euphemism for consumerism. It's just another way to say consumerism. So you need to try and fix the economy. Probably make it more autarkic, which means self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So, like
we need to
sort of
stop the cult of line going up equals more gooder.
Yeah. So we live in a debt-based economy, and we have a bunch of bad monetary policies that encourage consumption. So you probably need to put in some tariffs to make the economy more wholesome, more less focused around like just making dumb plastic shit or buying stuff or focused all around services. Because if you have an economy around services, of course the powers that be are going to encourage consumerism.
More regulations, more directions,
more
perhaps
tariffs.
maybe perhaps even forcing the line to go down for some reason. Consumerism.
You need tariffs, because what tariffs will do will encourage, more stuff we've made in your country. Now it's going to be more expensive, but it's going to mean that your country has to keep the GDP going, line going up.
Now, as someone has pointed out in the chat, we are running a bit long. So what I'm going to do is, maybe not everybody got to speak, but I am going to go ahead and close things out with some closing thoughts. And then the next convivium, we might think about being a little bit briefer. But regardless, here are some of my closing thoughts on the topic. So the question is, how do we stop consumerism, or how do we deal with it? How do we mitigate its effects? And everything that's been said is important, especially this two-pronged approach of, we have to fight the nihilism that undergirds consumerism while at the same time fighting the power structure that encourages consumerism to sort of cover up the ill effects of the nihilism. So whatever, Skellington, please.
Oh my fucking sorry. I just
Dude,
need
you
to.
have
I just
COVID-19? You having trouble
no.
breathing over there?
It's just that I put my mic close to my mouth, and so I just need to learn to. Whoop, take the mic away from my mouth. There it is.
So what are our options? Is what I'm getting at. So one is a command economy, right? And that doesn't seem very viable. If for no other reason than all the historical examples of command economies that we have in the world have just descended into extreme consumerism once the walls came down, so to speak. I'm thinking specifically of like East Berlin, West Berlin. The wall came down, and the first thing that all of the East Berliners went to go do is buy industrial quantities of coffee. So, that doesn't seem like a viable strategy, right? Also, command economies are dumb, so that doesn't seem to be helpful. But I was reading around for some for some solutions that other people, because okay, there are people out there that talk about the um, the bad things about the consumer economy, right? And usually it's from the angle of like, save the whales, don't buy plastic. But there were some things they said that, when I took them and reinterpreted them in a different angle, it actually kind of made a lot more sense. And this is sort of a religious approach, right? One of the things they said is that getting rid of consumerism, it could require a traveler or a transient mentality. What they meant by that was that people sort of felt more comfortable moving from place to place and not having very many possessions. But what I think is even more effective than that, because first of all, that's just not feasible for the vast majority of people to live like a hobo. But second of all, um, we can still have this traveler or transient mentality, and the thing is, what it's by understanding that this life that we're living is a sojourn. Like, we are not this life is not the only life. This is just sort of a brief period of time onto another life. And so, in that sense, I mean, it sort of brings back the old problem of, I've never seen a hearse with a trailer hitch, because you can't bring it with you when you're dead. And it's pithy, and it's kind of a um, it's kind of a meme, but it's true, right? I mean, no amount of consuming will comfort you when you're in the grave. Um, Additionally, we could think of, just in general terms, in a reevaluation of economics, right? Because right now, the way that our economic system is set up, and a lot of people have touched on this, is that the end of economics, which is a human institution, ought to be to serve man himself. Whereas in the consumer economy that we have created, it seems as though man is consuming, or sorry, man is being consumed in a sense to serve capital. Um, so there is this aspect of we have the structural problem, in a sort of wide angle sense with our economic system, and this flooding the zone with consumer goods blinds men to their true purpose, which I think a lot of people in the server have touched on. I don't think anybody has disagreed with is that the true purpose of man is to know God, to serve Him, and to strive to have a relationship with Him. And so the this is helpful for attacking that baseline of nihilism. The one thing we have to be comfortable doing as sort of religious people or right wing people is confidently asserting that actually God does exist. Actually, there are these objective values, these standards that mean something, and we have to be more comfortable with just like I don't know, just asserting these things as true principles because it seems to me like too often people it's like the right wing has all these tools in their tool belt that they've got God, they've got transcendent meaning, and they just shy away from really pushing point because I don't know, we're scared of having to debate or something and get caught in some kind of endless circle of haha, my grandpa was monkey, God not real, and all this, insane, all these tertiary battles
They're
that you get
they're
into.
people they're afraid of being shamed, which is why you need to use shame more in your repertoire.
I could have sworn you said chained, not shamed.
Shame.
Well, they may be afraid of both.
No, of course Despot would think that it's chain. I said chain.
Okay, but
He's only listening to what he wants to hear.
all right, guys. But those are really my closing thoughts on the matter. Does anybody have any closing thoughts that they would like to get in right quick before we go?
I will say just
Furious
one
typing.
one, one thing maybe to go off of what you said, Hyde. I think you said like okay, we need to be good about asserting these things, or I think that well that's not incorrect. I think the fundamental problem is that maybe the right the normie right is perhaps under the delusion that they can do what the left do, which is just like protest and yell louder, and
Mhm.
eventually people will start to listen to you. I think that the reason this doesn't work for the right is currently from the power structure level side of things, we don't have the monopoly on propaganda and intergenerational institutions like academia or media.
Mhm.
The one still somewhat fair or enterable battlefield for the asserting things will be at the very personal level, the level of subsidiarity, and just plainly, it's just a matter of like that's gonna be hard for people to do. It's gonna require getting out of the neat lifestyle or getting away from your introvert tendencies, and also going beyond just being a content creator because
Mhm.
being a content creator you can generate followers but not disciples, so to speak.
I have to like say that this is probably I would say one of my biggest criticisms of Dave, and I'm sure Dave would say that's not really fair, right? But like I think that Dave is a really great guy, but I mean his philosophy is basically just I'm just going to create content and I'll let you do the rest. I mean, there's a lot of intelligent
Uh,
people on the dissident right. It seems to me like no one wants to take up leadership position.
no, I don't know if that's necessarily.
and
Okay,
and
I will say
and
like
all
that's
of this sort of talking shop sort of stuff we're going to have to save for another discussion, gentlemen. It
mm,
was a
yeah.
pleasure having you all, and I hope to see you all again. I really enjoyed this discussion. And I think we're going to close it out here. So,
Subscribe for more school stories.
yeah, subscribe for more school stories, guys.
More skilling tales.
Subscribe for more Siege.
So, all of the ladies and gentlemen watching at home, this has been the first Hidebound Convivium. I hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night and God bless.